Dag Hammarskjöld, that former UN Secretary General, puts it so beautifully. God does not die, he says, the day we deny his existence, but we die on the day that our lives cease to be illumined by the radiance of a wonder which we can never describe, which is quite beyond us. We die the day our lives cease to be illumined by that radiance, that wonder. And we don't have to quarrel about a word, because God is only a word, is it not? God is only a concept. One never quarrels about reality. We only quarrel about opinions, about concepts, about judgments. Don't seek for truth, only drop your concepts, drop your opinions, drop your prejudices, drop your judgments, and you will see. You know, that was philosophy. That was metaphysics. How did you like it? Not bad, huh? Well, I think that will be the toughest session of all the ones we've had. Thought I'd bring you this little quote of St. Thomas. How about giving it to you in Latin for Quia de Deo scire non possumus quid sit, sed quid non sit, non possumus considerare de Deo quomodo sit, sed quomodo non sit. This is the introduction to his whole Summa Theologica. Since we do not know what God is, but what God is not, we cannot tell you God's way of being, but rather the way he is not. Then I gave you his De Trinitate. The loftiest degree of our knowledge of God is to know God as the unknown, tamquam ignotum. And in his Quaestio Disputata de Potentia Dei 7, he says, this is what is ultimate in the human knowledge of God, to know that we do not know God. This is what is ultimate in the human knowledge of God, to know that we do not know God. This gentleman was considered the prince of theologians, as I told you yesterday. He was certainly acquainted with the scriptures. He was a mystic and a canonized saint. We're standing on pretty good ground. Then what was he talking about when he talked about God? And what is the meaning of the scriptures? More about that later. See, I keep you coming that way. In India, we have a Sanskrit saying for this kind of thing. It is neti, neti. Not that. Not that. Sometimes referred to as the via negativa. Negative way. You know, I read a marvelous work by the famous C.S. Lewis. It's a little booklet, A Grief Observed. It was his diary when his wife died. He married an American woman, said to his friends, God gave me in my 60s what he denied me in my 20s. I'm wildly in love. Fell in love with this woman, married her, and he had hardly married her when she died a painful death of cancer. Then C.S. Lewis says, the whole of my faith crumbled like a house of cards. He was the great Christian apologist. And when disaster struck home, then he asks himself, is God a loving father? Or is he the great vivisector? Pretty good evidence for both things. And you can look at things in a somewhat slanted way and push aside evidence of the contrary. Remember when my own mother got cancer, my sister said to me, Tony, why did God allow this to happen to mother? I said, my dear, last year, 1 million people died in China of starvation, of a drought, calculated at almost 1 million. You never raised the question. And so sometimes the nicest thing that could happen to us, for us to be awakened to reality, is for calamity to strike. Then we begin to rethink. Then you might lose your beliefs and come to faith, your childish beliefs, and come to faith, as C.S. Lewis did. Do read that book. It's marvelously written. He said, I never had any doubt before about people surviving death, but when my wife died, I was no longer certain. Why? Because it was so important to me that she be living. And, he's the master of comparisons and analogies. He says it's like a rope. Someone says to you, would this would this bear the weight of about 120 pounds? And you say, yeah. Well, we're going to let down your best friend on this rope. You say, wait a minute, let me test that again. Now you're not so sure. And somewhere in that diary, he says a marvelous thing. I was so happy and consoled, this was years ago, to find him say, we know nothing about God. We cannot know anything about God. Even our very questions about God are absurd. Marvelous. Of course your questions are absurd. Why? It's like the person born blind, the man born blind, who says to you, that color green, is it hot or is it cold? Nati, not that. Is it long or is it short? Not that. Is it sweet or is it sour? Not that. Is it round or is it oval or is it square? Not that. See, he's coming from the other senses, from his limited experience. He has no words or no concepts for this world of which he has no idea, no intuition, no experience, the world of colors. One can only speak in analogies. Not that. No matter what he asks, it isn't that. Your wording is wrong. Your question is absurd. So, C.S. Lewis says something like this. I'm not quite sure I've got the exact words, but it's something like this. It's like asking, how many minutes are there in the color yellow? And everybody's taking it very seriously and discussing it and fighting about it. You know what the answer to that question is? How many minutes are there in the color yellow? 25 carats. And the other guy says, no, 17 potatoes. And then they're fighting. Not that. The ultimate. This is what is ultimate in the human knowledge of God, to know that we do not know. Our great tragedy, my dears, is that we know too much. We think we know. That is our tragedy. And so we never discover. In fact, Thomas Aquinas is not only a theologian, he's a great philosopher. And he says repeatedly in many places, all the efforts of the human mind cannot exhaust the essence of a single fly. Cannot. We really have no notion of the nature of a fly, of an individual fly. Just what I was telling you yesterday. The concept is abstract, the reality concrete, etc. He puts it in his own unique way. The limitations of the human mind. The danger we have of equating the concept with reality, and as a result, never coming in touch with reality. Now, I also quoted Dag Hammarskjöld. I like to be exact, and I'm afraid the quote I gave you was from memory and wasn't quite accurate. The original is much more beautiful. He says, God does not die on the day we cease to believe in a personal deity. But we die on the day when our lives cease to be illumined by the steady radiance, renewed daily, of a wonder, the source of which is beyond all reason. But we die on the day when our lives cease to be illumined by the steady radiance, renewed daily, of a wonder, the source of which is beyond all reason. Something beyond this conceptualizing mind of ours, which, when perceived, intuited, however dimly, creates the wonder, and our lives become illumined. Marvelously put. But more about this when I talk about Scripture.